20 minutes before walking down the aisle, I answered my fiance's call, but he didn't know I was listening. The prenup locks her in. The baby seals the brand. She's just the image. You're the real deal. Babe, I was 6 months pregnant, wearing a $10,000 dress, standing in front of 800 guests, and the woman laughing on that call, she was sitting in the third row. But here's what my billionaire fiance didn't know. My father owned his company's loans, and I just recorded everything. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, you need to hear what happened next. Hit that like button, drop a comment, and subscribe because this wedding didn't end the way anyone expected. This is my story. 20 minutes before my wedding, I heard my fiance's voice through his phone. He wasn't talking to me. The prenup locks her in. Once she signs, the baby seals the brand image. Monday, the IPO goes live. You'll get your cut, babe. I was 6 months pregnant, standing in my Vera Wang gown, holding white roses, and the woman laughing on the other end. She was sitting in the third row. This is the story of how I didn't just cancel a wedding. I destroyed an empire. My name is Claire Morrison, and I should have seen it coming. But love makes you blind, or maybe desperation does. When your mother dies and your father shuts you out, you start looking for safety anywhere you can find it. I thought I found it in Brett Ashford. I was wrong. The bridal suite at St. Patrick's Cathedral smelled like lilies and lies. I sat on the velvet bench, adjusting my veil in the mirror. The dress hugged my swollen belly perfectly. Brett had insisted on Vera Wang. He'd insisted on everything. Actually, the venue, the guest list, even my hairstyle. I told myself it was because he loved perfection. Now I know it was because he loved control. My phone buzzed on the vanity table. Brett's name lit up the screen with a heart emoji. I smiled, pressing accept. Almost ready, love, I said softly. Silence, then voices. Muffled at first, then clearer. My blood turned to ice. Relax, Amber. The prenup traps her. Once she signs, the baby locks the brand image. Monday, the IPO goes live. You'll get your bonus. A woman's laugh. Light, cruel, familiar. And after tonight, Brett's voice, smooth as poison. After tonight, she's just the image. You're the real deal. My hand shook so hard the phone nearly slipped. I stared at my reflection, white dress, diamond tiara, 6 months pregnant with a man's child, a man who just called me the image. The conversation continued. I should have hung up. Instead, I grabbed my other phone and started recording. My fingers moved on autopilot while my brain screamed, she'll sign anything I put in front of her. Brett said, pregnant women are emotional, easy to manipulate. What about after the baby comes? Amber asked. We'll see. If the IPO hits target, I'll have enough to pay her off. Maybe joint custody. Keep up appearances. And us, you'll be VP of Communications by Christmas. We'll get that penthouse in Tribeca. She can have the Hamptons house with the screaming baby. They laughed together. I stopped recording. My reflection stared back at me. Mascara starting to run. The baby kicked once, as if asking, Mommy, what's wrong? Everything, sweetheart, everything. I saved the recording, forwarded it to my email with the subject line, Evidence 3:45 p.m. Then I scrolled through my contacts to a name I hadn't called in 5 years. Dad, Thomas Morrison, private equity titan. The man who'd shut me out after Mom died in a car accident when I was 16. He blamed me for distracting her while she drove. I spent 12 years trying to earn his forgiveness. He never gave it. Until 2 days ago, when he suddenly called saying he'd attend the wedding, I'd cried with relief. Thought maybe we could heal. Now I understood. He knew something. My thumb hovered over his name. Pride told me not to call. Survival told me I had no choice. I pressed dial. 1 ring, 2, 3. Claire, his voice deep and steady. Dad, mine cracked. I need you. A pause that felt like forever. Where are you? Cathedral. The bridal suite. He. Dead to bed. He's been lying. And about everything. I know. Those 2 words hit me like a truck. You am. I've known for 6 weeks. That's why I'm already here. What? Look out your window. Black sedan, Across the street, I stumbled to the window, pulled back the curtain. A black Mercedes sat at the curb. The back window rolled down. Thomas Morrison looked up at me, phone to his ear, expression unreadable. "I've been investigating him since you announced your engagement," he said. "Found the affair, the IPO manipulation, the fake valuations. I have everything." "Claire, then why didn't you tell me?" I whispered. "Because you needed to see it yourself. You never would have believed me. You had to learn this lesson on your own." Tears burned my eyes. "What lesson?" "That some men are predators, and that when you're prey, you have two choices: run or become the hunter." The baby kicked again, harder this time. "I can't do this," I said. "I can't walk down that aisle." "Yes, you can, and you will. Dad, listen to me. If you run now, he wins. He'll spin this as you being unstable, pregnant and emotional. He'll get custody rights. He'll take your child and use that baby as a tax write-off while he plays house with his mistress." My hand went to my belly, protective. "But if you walk down that aisle," Thomas continued, "if you let him lie in front of 800 witnesses in a live stream, if you let him perjure himself in a legal ceremony, then I can destroy him. Cleanly, legally, completely." "How?" "I own 40% of his lender consortium. I need public proof of fraud to freeze his IPO. You're going to give that to me." I looked at my reflection again. The woman staring back wasn't the naive girl who'd said yes to Brett Ashford. She was someone harder, someone who'd just heard her entire life dismissed as the image. "What do I have to do?" I asked. "Put on your veil, walk down that aisle, smile, and at the altar, ask him one question. Just one." "What question?" "Ask him if there's anything he needs to confess, anything that could hurt your family. When he lies, we'll have him. That's it. That's everything. Truth is the sharpest weapon there is, Claire. Let him hang himself with it." A knock on the door. "5 minutes. Miss Morrison?" I wiped my eyes, reapplied lipstick with steady hands, pinned the veil in place. "Dad, I'm here. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Thank me when it's over." The line went dead. I picked up my bouquet, white roses and baby's breath. Hidden inside, I knew, was something my father had already arranged. A microphone, a recorder, everything I needed. I looked at the door. Beyond it, 800 people waited. Brett waited. Amber waited. They had no idea what was coming. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "Watch Mommy be strong." Then I opened the door and walked toward my wedding. Not as a bride, as a hunter. The organ began playing as I stood at the cathedral entrance. Thomas Morrison appeared beside me, offering his arm. Up close, I could see the gray at his temples, the lines around his eyes. 12 years of distance in one fate. "You look like your mother," he said quietly. "Don't. She'd be proud of you right now." I blinked back tears. "Let's just get through this." The doors opened. 800 faces turned toward us. Camera flashes sparked like stars. The aisle stretched endlessly ahead, white petals scattered across marble. At the altar, Brett Ashford stood in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, 6'2", dark hair perfectly styled, wearing the Rolex I'd given him for his birthday. He smiled that megawatt smile that had made me fall in love. Now it looked like a shark's grin. Beside him, his best man held the rings. In the third row, Amber Sinclair sat in a red dress that screamed, "Mistress." She wasn't even trying to hide it. Thomas's grip tightened on my arm. Steady, we walked. Each step felt like walking underwater. I focused on breathing, on the baby, on staying upright. People whispered as we passed. "She's glowing. 6 months pregnant and stunning. Fairy tale wedding. If only they knew." We reached the altar. Thomas placed my hand in Brett's. Their eyes met for 1 second, and I saw something pass between them. Recognition, challenge. Brett knew Thomas hated him. He just didn't know why he'd shown up. Father Patrick began the ceremony. His voice echoed through the cathedral, ancient words about love and faithfulness. I barely heard them. My heart pounded so loud it drowned everything out. Brett squeezed my hand, whispered, "You're shaking." "Nervous," I whispered back. "Don't be. This is our beginning." Our ending, I thought, but I smiled. The ceremony progressed. Readings about love, a hymn about commitment, all of it hollow, all of it lies. Finally, Father Patrick reached the vows. "Brett Ashford," he intoned, "do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, forsaking all others, as long as you both shall live?" Brett turned to me, looked deep into my eyes, performed beautifully for the cameras. "I do." The applause rippled through the pews. Someone sniffled. Amber stared at her hands. Father Patrick turned to me. "Claire Morrison, do you take this man?" "Wait." The word came out quiet but clear. The microphone picked it up. Silence crashed through the cathedral. Father Patrick blinked. "I'm sorry." I looked at Brett. "Before I answer, I need to ask you something." His smile faltered. "Just for a second." "Sweetheart, this isn't... Is there anything you need to confess?" I asked. My voice steady now, strong. "Anything that could hurt our family. Anything you're hiding." Gasps scattered through the crowd. Brett's jaw tightened. 800 people held their breath. "Claire," he said carefully, "what are you talking about? Just answer the question. Yes or no? Is there anything you need to tell me before we make these vows?" Father Patrick looked between us, confused. Thomas sat in the front pew, expression carved from stone. Brett recovered, smiled that charming smile, reached for my hand. "Of course not," he said clearly, firmly. "There's nothing in this world I'm hiding from you. You're my everything." The lie rang through the cathedral like a bell. I smiled back. "Okay, then I do." Relief washed over his face. Father Patrick cleared his throat and finished the ceremony in a rush. The awkward moment passed. People convinced themselves it was just wedding jitters. But in the back row, a man in a gray suit lowered his recording device. Victor Hayes, my father's attorney. He'd gotten every word. Brett kissed me. The crowd erupted in applause. Organ music swelled. We walked back down the aisle together as husband and wife. He leaned close. "What the hell was that?" "Cold feet," I said sweetly. "You understand. You embarrassed me. I'm sorry." I wasn't. Outside, confetti rained down. Photographers shouted our names. Brett waved and smiled. The perfect groom. I played my part too. The glowing bride. The happy ending. A black sedan pulled up. Not the white limousine we'd arranged. This one had Thomas Morrison's insignia on the door. "What?" Brett started. "Change of plans," Thomas said, appearing beside us. "Security concerns. You'll ride with me." Before Brett could protest, Thomas guided me into the car. Brett followed, trapped by cameras and appearances. The door shut. Tinted windows blocked out the world. Thomas sat across from us, Victor Hayes beside him. "What is this?" Brett demanded. "This," Thomas said calmly, "is your last chance to tell the truth." Brett's face went red. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then you're stupider than I thought." Thomas pulled out a tablet, pressed play. Brett's voice filled the car. "The prenup locks her in. Once she signs, the baby seals the brand image." The color drained from Brett's face. "Where did you get that?" "From your pocket dial," I said quietly. 20 minutes before the wedding. You recorded me." "Actually, you recorded yourself. I just saved it." Thomas leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You are going to the reception. You are going to smile. And when I give the signal, you are going to confess everything. The affair, the fraud, the manipulation. Like hell I am." "Or Simon," Victor interjected. "We released this recording to the Securities and Exchange Commission, along with evidence of your IPO fraud, your fake valuations, your offshore accounts." Brett's eyes darted between us, cornered. "You have nothing." "We have everything," Thomas said. "Bank records, emails, testimony from 3 whistleblowers in your company. And now we have proof you committed perjury during a legal ceremony. That's not ceremony. Vows aren't legally binding." "Actually," Victor smiled, In New York, they are. You lied under oath in front of 800 witnesses. That recording is timestamped. Cross-referenced with live stream footage. You're finished. But Brett looked at me, really looked at me, saw someone he didn't recognize. You did this, he whispered. You set me up. No, I said. You set yourself up. I just stopped pretending not to see it. The car pulled up to the Plaza Hotel. Photographers swarmed. Brett had two choices. Make a scene or play along. He chose survival. For now. This isn't over, he hissed. Thomas smiled. Cold. Dangerous. You're absolutely right. It's just beginning. We stepped out of the car into a sea of flashing lights. Brett took my arm, squeezed too tight. Cameras captured his smile. They didn't capture his whisper. You're going to regret this. I whispered back. I already regret ever meeting you. We walked into the reception, into the ballroom where 800 people waited to celebrate our marriage, where in less than an hour everything would burn. The Plaza Ballroom glittered like a diamond. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across white tablecloths and Tiffany blue centerpieces. Ice sculptures gleamed. A string quartet played softly. Waiters circulated with champagne flutes and hors d'oeuvres. Everyone who mattered was there. Tech investors, board members, society columnists, 3 senators, the mayor. Brett had invited them to witness his triumph. Instead, they'd witness his destruction. I sat at the head table, hands folded over my belly. My bridesmaid Rachel Bennett hovered nearby, concern etched across her face. She'd been my best friend since nursing school, before I dropped out to start my design business, before I'd met Brett. Are you okay? She whispered, crouching beside my chair. That thing at the altars was intense. I'm fine, Claire, I know you. You're not fine. I looked at her, really looked. Rachel had steady hands and kind eyes. She'd held my hand when Mom died. When Dad pushed me away, she was the sister I'd never had. I need you to trust me, I said quietly. In about 30 minutes, something's going to happen. Don't panic. Just stay close. What's going to happen? Justice, before she could ask more. Brett appeared, grabbed my elbow, pulled me toward the dance floor. Smile, he commanded through clenched teeth. Everyone's watching. The quartet shifted to our song. At Last by Etta James. How ironic. Brett pulled me close, one hand on my waist, the other clasping mine. We swayed under the chandeliers. To everyone else, it looked romantic. His grip hurt. I don't know what you think you're doing, he hissed in my ear. But it ends now. You're going to tell your father to back off. You're going to sign the postnup, and you're going to shut your mouth. Or what? Or I'll make sure you never see this baby. I'll prove you're unstable, unfit. I'll get full custody, and you'll get supervised visits. The threat should have terrified me. Instead, I felt calm, clear. You're forgetting something. I said, what? You have to prove I'm unfit. I just have to prove you're a criminal. His hand tightened. The baby kicked. Hard. I gasped. Something wrong? Brett asked, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Concerned husband. Perfect act. Just the baby, I said. She doesn't like you. It's a girl. Did I forget to mention that? I hadn't forgotten. I deliberately withheld it. One small power I'd kept for myself. The song ended. Applause erupted. Brett released me and I stepped back, putting distance between us. Thomas appeared at my elbow. Time for toasts. Brett's smile looked like it might crack his face. Already, people are eager, Thomas said. Victor's coordinating with the AV team now. I watched Brett's eyes track to the AV booth. Saw him notice Victor Hayes speaking to the sound technician. Saw panic flicker across his face before he locked it down. Ladies and gentlemen, the MC's voice boomed. Please raise your glasses for the groom's toast. Brett straightened his shoulders, walked to the microphone like a man heading to the gallows, smiled at the crowd. Thank you all for being here, he began. Today is the happiest day of my life. Lie number 1. When I met Claire 2 years ago, I knew she was special, beautiful, talented, kind, the woman I've been waiting for. Lie number 2. And now we're starting a family, building a future together. I promise to love her, honor her, and protect her every day of our lives. Lie number 3, 4, and 5. He raised his glass. To my beautiful wife, to loyalty, to partnership, to forever. 800 people raised their glasses. To Claire and Brett. Brett looked at me, triumphant, thought he'd won. I stood, slowly, my pregnant belly visible to everyone, raised my own glass of sparkling water. To my husband, I said, my voice carried through the room. To honesty, the word hung in the air like smoke. Brett's smile froze. To honesty, he echoed weakly. Then Thomas Morrison stood. Since we're toasting honesty, and he said, voice cutting through champagne haze, I have something to share. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Thomas nodded toward the AV booth. The lights dimmed, the speakers crackled to life, and Brett Ashford's voice filled the ballroom. The prenup locks her in. Once she signs, the baby seals the brand image. Monday, the IPO goes live. You'll get your cut. Babe, silence. Pure, crystalline silence. Then a woman's laugh through the speakers. Amber's laugh. And after tonight, she's just the image. You're the real deal. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, heads swiveling between me, Brett, and the speakers. Someone dropped a glass. It shattered like everything else. Brett's face drained white. He lunged toward the AV booth. Turn that off, turn it off now. Security stepped in front of him. Thomas's men. They'd been positioned all evening. The recording continued. She'll sign anything I put in front of her. Pregnant women are emotional, easy to manipulate. I watched Brett's world collapse in real time. Board members checking their phones, investors standing to leave, society columnists typing frantically. In the third row, Amber Sinclair rose to run. Rachel blocked her path. Oh no, Rachel said sweetly. You're going to stay and watch. Amber's face twisted with panic. The recording ended. The lights came up. 800 pairs of eyes fixed on Brett Ashford. He grabbed the microphone. This is fake deepfake technology she edited. Audio forensics confirmed by 3 independent labs. Victor Hayes announced, stepping forward with a folder. Time-stamped, metadata verified, chain of custody documented. A man stood from the investor table. Patterson, from Patterson Capital, Brett's primary lender. Mr. Ashford, Patterson said, voice like gravel. On behalf of the lending consortium, we're freezing all credit lines effective immediately. Your IPO is suspended pending fraud investigation. You can't do that. We just did. Your company valuation was based on brand integrity. You just destroyed that on live stream. The word live stream hit Brett like a hammer. His eyes went to the cameras, the feed that had broadcast to social media, thousands watching in real time. He turned to me. Claire, please, I can explain. I stood. The room fell silent again. 800 people waiting to see what the pregnant bride would do. I walked toward him, slowly, every eye following, stopped 3 feet away. You told me you loved me, I said, quiet, conversational. The microphone picked up every word. You told me this baby was your dream. You told me I was safe. Brett reached for me. I stepped back. Don't touch me. Applause started. One person, then another, then a wave of it, building like thunder. Brett stood alone in front of 800 people, clapping for his destruction. That's when the real catastrophe began. The ballroom spun, or maybe I was spinning. Either way, the floor tilted sideways and suddenly I was falling. Strong hands caught me. Thomas's voice in my ear. I've got you. The baby. I gasped. Something's wrong. Pain lanced through my abdomen. Sharp. Terrifying. The room tilted again and suddenly I couldn't breathe. Call 911, Rachel shouted. She was beside me now, fingers on my wrist, taking my pulse. Nurse training kicking in. Claire, look at me. How bad is the pain? Bad. My vision blurred. Rachel, I can't lose her. You won't. Stay with me. The crowd parted. Someone brought a chair. Thomas lowered me into it while Rachel barked orders at shocked guests. Brett tried to approach, but Victor blocked him. "You've done enough," Victor said coldly. Sirens wailed outside. The pain got worse. I doubled over, clutching my belly. "Hang on, sweetheart," Thomas said, his hand on my shoulder, steadying. "Help's coming." Paramedics burst through the doors with a stretcher. They moved fast. Professional, checking vitals, asking questions. "How far along are 28 weeks?" I managed. "Bleeding." "I don't know. Maybe." "Pressure contractions." "Yes, both." They lifted me onto the stretcher. The ceiling passed overhead, chandelier after chandelier. Rachel held my hand. "I'm coming with you," she said. Thomas followed. Brett tried to climb into the ambulance, but a paramedic stopped him. "Family only. I'm her husband." She said no. The paramedic replied, nodding toward me. The door slammed shut. The ambulance pulled away. Sirens screaming. Inside, the paramedic worked quickly. Blood pressure cuff, IV line, oxygen mask. Everything moved too fast and too slow at once. "Am I losing her?" I whispered. "Not if we can help it," the paramedic said. "Stay calm. We're going to Mount Sinai. They have the best NICU in the city." Mount Sinai, where Mom had died after the car accident, where I'd said goodbye to her in a sterile room that smelled like antiseptic and grief. I started crying. "Hey," Rachel squeezed my hand. "None of that. You're stronger than this. That baby's stronger than this. We're going to be okay." The ambulance raced through Manhattan, red lights flashing, world blurring past. My body betrayed me with each contraction, each spike of pain. At the hospital, they rushed me to labor and delivery. A doctor appeared, young but competent. Dr. Catherine Pierce. Her badge read, "Claire Morrison." "Yes, I'm Dr. Pierce. Tell me what happened." "Stress," I said. "Too much stress." She examined me quickly, efficiently, checked the fetal monitor. Her face stayed neutral, but I saw the concern in her eyes. "Your blood pressure is dangerously high. 170 over 110. The baby's heart rate is elevated. We're seeing signs of preeclampsia." "What does that mean?" "It means we need to monitor you closely. If it gets worse, we may need to deliver early." "No." Panic clawed at my throat. "She's only 28 weeks. She's too small." "I know. That's why we're going to do everything we can to keep her in there longer. But Claire, I need you to understand. If your blood pressure doesn't stabilize, if the baby goes into distress, we won't have a choice." Thomas appeared in the doorway. "How is she?" Dr. Pierce looked at him. "Are you family and I'm her father?" "She's critical, but stable. For now." For now. Those two words hung like an axe. They admitted me to a private room. Monitors beeped steadily, tracking my heartbeat and the baby's. An IV drip fed medication into my veins. Rachel sat in the chair beside my bed, refusing to leave. Thomas stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, coordinating, planning, being the general he'd always been. "Victor's handling the press," he said, hanging up. "The recording's gone viral. Brett's company stock is in free fall. Several board members have already resigned." "I don't care," I said. He looked at me. "What?" "I don't care about Brett or his company or revenge. I just want my baby to be okay." For the first time in 12 years, my father's expression softened. "She will be," he said. "Morrison women are fighters." The door burst open. Brett strode in, disheveled and wild-eyed. "Claire, get out," I said. "I need to talk to you. Come on." I said, "Get out." Thomas moved between us. "You heard her? This is my wife, my baby. Your wife who you called the image. Your baby you plan to use as a brand asset." Thomas's voice could have cut glass. "You have no rights here." "I have every right. I'm the father." Pierce entered. "Sir, you need to leave. You're upsetting my patient and endangering her health." "I'm not going anywhere until security appeared. Two large men in uniform. "The hospital can ban you," Pierce said calmly. "Or you can leave voluntarily. Your choice." Brett looked at me, really looked. Saw something he'd never bothered to see before. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," I replied. "It is." They escorted him out. His shouting faded down the corridor. I closed my eyes. The monitors beeped. The IV dripped. My body fought to keep my daughter safe. And somewhere in the city, Brett Ashford's empire continued to burn. But I didn't care anymore. I only cared about surviving the next breath, the next contraction, the next hour, because that's what mothers do. We fight, we endure, we protect. Even when the world is ending, we protect our babies. The night stretched long and terrible. Every hour, nurses checked my vitals. Every hour, the numbers stayed too high. My body, pushed past its limits, was shutting down. At 3 a.m., Dr. Pierce returned. Claire, I need you to listen carefully. Your blood pressure isn't responding to medication. The baby's heart rate is becoming erratic. If we wait much longer, we could lose you both. No, I whispered. She's too small. I know, but our NICU is excellent. Babies born at 28 weeks have an 80% survival rate with our team. Those are good odds. 80% means that 20% don't make it. Yes, but 100% of mothers and babies die if we don't act. Rachel took my hand. Claire, trust her. Thomas stood behind Rachel, his face pale. I looked at all of them, then at my belly, where my daughter fought for every heartbeat. Okay, I said. Do it. They prepped me for emergency cesarean. Everything moved fast. Surgical suite, anesthesia, bright lights, and cold air. Dr. Pierce's voice, you're going to feel pressure. Pressure, such a gentle word for being cut open. Then a sound, weak, tiny, but unmistakable. A baby's cry. It's a girl, Dr. Pierce announced. 2 pounds, 4 ounces. I tried to see her, but they'd already whisked her away to the NICU team. Warming tables, tubes, monitors. Is she okay? I asked. She's breathing on her own. That's a very good sign. They let me see her for 5 seconds before taking her to the NICU. 5 seconds to memorize my daughter's face. Tiny, red, perfect. Hi, baby girl, I whispered. Mommy loves you. Then she was gone. They dolled me up, wheeled me to recovery. The world felt distant and strange. Rachel appeared with tears streaming. She's beautiful. Claire, she's a fighter. Can I see her? Soon, they're stabilizing her. Dr. Pierce says she's doing better than expected. I closed my eyes, exhausted, terrified, grateful. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Congratulations on the baby. Hope you enjoy single motherhood. My lawyers will be in touch about custody. Brett, I stared at the message, then showed it to Thomas. His jaw clenched. He's bluffing. Mr. Baltimore. No judge would give him custody after what he did. He's rich. He's connected. And I gestured at myself. Hospital gown. Pale, weak. I'm not. You're wrong. Thomas took my hand. First time in 12 years. You're a Morrison, Paul, and Morrisons don't lose. But looking at my father's face, I saw something that terrified me more than Brett's threat. I saw doubt. Morning light filtered through hospital blinds. I woke to the sound of monitors and the absence of my daughter. Rachel dozed in the chair beside my bed. Thomas stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, conducting business like my world wasn't ending. Pierce entered with a tablet. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck. That's accurate. She checked my vitals. Blood pressure's coming down. 140/90. Still high, but better. When can I see her? Soon, monsieur. The NICU team is doing rounds now. She had a good night. No major complications. No major complications didn't sound reassuring enough. What about minor ones? Dr. Pierce hesitated. She needed some respiratory support, a nasal cannula, not a ventilator. Her oxygen saturation dropped a few times, but she recovered. It's normal for preemies. Normal. Nothing about this was normal. Can I go to her? Not yet. You lost a lot of blood during surgery. We need to make sure you're stable first. I'm stable. I'm fine. Claire, my baby is in the NICU without me. I'm fine, babe. Dr. Pierce looked at Thomas. He nodded. Wheelchair, Dr. Pierce said, and if you feel dizzy, we're coming back immediately. They brought a wheelchair, helped me transfer from bed. Everything hurt. My incision, my back, my heart. Rachel pushed me through corridors that smelled like antiseptic and fear. Other families passed, carrying flowers or balloons. Normal births, normal babies. The NICU doors required a code. Rachel punched it in. Inside, the lights were dimmed. Monitors beeped softly. Tiny isolates lined the walls, each containing a miracle or a tragedy, depending on the day. A nurse approached. Claire Morrison. Yes, I'm Stephanie. I've been taking care of your daughter. She's right over here. We turned a corner, and there she was. 2 pounds, 4 ounces of fighting spirit, tubes in her nose, wires on her chest, an IV in her tiny hand, but breathing, living, mine. I started crying. Can I touch her? I whispered. Absolutely. Wash your hands first, then you can reach through the porthole. I scrubbed my hands until they hurt, then reached into the isolette and touched my daughter's hand. She was so small. Her entire hand fit on my fingertip, skin like tissue paper, nails like grains of rice. But she gripped my finger. Hi, baby girl, I whispered. I'm your mama. Her eyes opened, dark blue, unfocused but searching. She knows your voice, Stephanie said. Babies can recognize their mother's voice from the womb. Does she have a name? Rachel asked softly. I looked at my daughter, thought about my mother, Grace, who died too young, thought about surviving, about fighting. Hope, I said. Her name is Hope, because that's all I had left. We sat there for an hour, me in the wheelchair, hand through the porthole, talking to Hope, telling her about her grandmother, about the world waiting for her. Thomas stood behind me, silent. She has your mother's nose, he finally said, and your stubbornness. He almost smiled. That's when Victor Hayes appeared, face grim. Thomas, we have a problem. We moved to a consultation room. Victor spread papers across the table. Brett filed an emergency motion this morning. He's claiming Claire is mentally unstable, that the stress she created caused premature labor, endangering the baby. That's insane, Rachel said. That's strategy, Victor replied. He's trying to flip the narrative, make her the villain. On what grounds, I asked. He has an affidavit from a psychiatrist. Dr. Marcus Webb claims you've been exhibiting signs of paranoid delusions, erratic behavior, emotional instability. I've never even met this doctor. Doesn't matter. It's sworn testimony. And Brett's lawyers are good. They're arguing that you orchestrated the recording, the public humiliation, specifically to harm him financially. They're calling it parental alienation. But he lied, he betrayed me, which they're spinning as him being a flawed human who made mistakes, while you're a vengeful woman who endangered your own pregnancy for revenge. I stared at the documents, at my name printed in legal jargon, at words like unstable and unfit. Can he win? I whispered. Victor and Thomas exchanged looks. There's a chance, Victor admitted. Small, but real. If Brett can convince a judge you're unstable, he could get emergency custody, or at minimum, supervised visits only. Hope's in the NICU. She can't be moved. And then he'd be the decision maker for her medical care. The room tilted. No, absolutely not. Claire, Thomas said carefully. We need to be smart about this. We can't just react emotionally. He called my baby a brand asset. I know, and we have proof. But courts care about what's best for the child, not what's fair to the parents. We need to show you're the stable one. How do I do that when I'm falling apart? Thomas crouched in front of my wheelchair, met my eyes. You do what your mother did. You survive. Those words hit like a slap. My mother, who'd survived my father's emotional distance, who'd raised me alone, who'd died before I could thank her. Mom would have fought, I said. She would have done more than fight. She would have won. I looked at the papers again, at Brett's lies printed in black and white. Then let's win. Victor nodded. We need to move fast. The custody hearing is in 48 hours. I'll need statements from everyone. Rachel, you'll testify to Claire's character. Thomas, you'll testify to Brett's fraud. Claire, well, you'll need to stay calm on the stand. I can do that. And we need one more thing. What? Victor pulled out another document. A subpoena. We need Amber Sinclair. If she testifies against Brett, confirms the affair, details his plans to use the baby for image management, we win. She won't do it, I said. She's loyal to him. Everyone's loyal until they're fitting prison time. Thomas smiled grimly. Victor, make her an offer she can't refuse. As they planned strategy, I returned to the NICU, to hope, to my reason for fighting. She slept peacefully, unaware of the battle raging around her. Your daddy wants to take you from me, I whispered. But he's not going to win. I promise you that, baby girl. He's not going to win. Hope's tiny hand gripped my finger tighter, and in that moment, I stopped feeling like a victim. I felt like a warrior. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing. News alerts, social media notifications. The recording had gone fully viral. Hashtag Brett Ashford was trending #1. The comments were brutal. Imagine calling your pregnant wife the image. This man is a sociopath. Claire Morrison is a queen for exposing him at the wedding. I scrolled through hundreds of messages, support from strangers, but also hate. She trapped him with a baby. Gold digger got what she deserved. Fake recording. Believe all women is a lie. Rachel took the phone away. Stop reading that garbage. They think I'm lying. Some people will always side with powerful men. Ignore them. But I couldn't, because those comments represented potential jury pool, potential judges who might believe Brett's narrative. Thomas entered with coffee. Victor's meeting with Amber Sinclair today. Her lawyer reached out. She wants to talk. What's the catch? Immunity. She'll testify against Brett if we guarantee no criminal charges. Can we do that? Not our call. But Victor knows people at the district attorney's office. If Amber delivers solid testimony, they'll consider a deal. Hope stirred in her isolette. I stood, walked carefully to her. Each step hurt, but I didn't care. How's she doing? Thomas asked. Better. They removed one of the tubes last night. Her oxygen saturation is improving. She's a fighter, like her grandmother. Thomas was quiet for a moment. I should have told you more about your mother, about how strong she was. Why didn't you? Because talking about her meant feeling everything I'd buried, the guilt, the regret. I blamed you for the accident because it was easier than blaming myself. For what? For not being there, for choosing work over family, for making her drive alone that night because I was too busy with a conference call. I turned to him, saw tears in his eyes for the first time in 12 years. Dad, I lost her and I pushed you away because I couldn't bear losing you too. Stupid logic, but there it is. You didn't lose me. I almost did. Watching you nearly die during that surgery. He stopped, cleared his throat. I'm not losing you again. Or Hope. Brett Ashford can burn in hell before I let him take my family. We stood together, watching Hope sleep. Two broken people, finally healing. That afternoon, Victor returned from his meeting with Amber. She's talking, he said. Everything. The affair started 8 months ago. Brett specifically targeted Claire because Thomas Morrison's daughter gave him credibility with investors. The pregnancy accelerated his timeline. He planned to divorce her after the IPO, keep custody for image purposes, and promote Amber to VP. That's premeditated fraud, Thomas said. Exactly. And Amber has proof. Emails, text messages, voice memos where Brett explicitly discusses using the baby as a brand asset. Why is she flipping now? I asked. Self-preservation. Brett's lawyers offered her up as the scapegoat, claimed she seduced him, manipulated him, orchestrated everything. She realized he was going to destroy her to save himself. Classic Brett, loyalty only flows upward. Will she testify? Thomas asked. Yes, in exchange for immunity and witness protection. She's terrified of Brett. She should be, I muttered. Claire, Victor said carefully. There's something else. Amber claims Brett talked about ensuring the pregnancy ended early. My blood froze. What? She says he researched medications that could trigger premature labor, ways to stress you into miscarriage without it being traceable. The room spun. He tried to kill our baby. We can't prove it, But Amber's willing to testify. He discussed it. I thought about the herbal tea Brett insisted I drink, the supplements he ordered online, the business trips where he came home smelling like Amber's perfume. He was poisoning me, I whispered. Rachel gasped. Thomas's face turned murderous. If we can prove that, Victor said, Brett doesn't just lose custody. He goes to prison for attempted murder. How do we prove it? We need those supplements, the tea, anything he gave you. They're at the apartment, his apartment. Can you get them? He changed the locks. Victor filed a restraining order against me going near the building. Thomas pulled out his phone. Give me the address. I'll have someone retrieve everything. While they coordinated, I sat beside Hope's isolette, thinking about how close I'd come to losing her, how Brett had actively tried to harm us. Rage bubbled up, hot and clarifying. Dr. Pierce, I called to the attending physician. I need my medical records, all prenatal visits, blood work, everything. May I ask why? My husband may have been poisoning me. I need evidence. Dr. Pierce's face went pale. I'll get them immediately. 20 minutes later, she returned with a thick file. Claire, I'm looking at your blood work from 3 months ago. Your liver enzymes were elevated. We attributed it to pregnancy, but it could have been toxins. Yes, I'm ordering a tox screen now. If there are traces of any abortifacients, we'll find them. Brett had been so careful, so calculated, but he'd underestimated one thing. Mothers protect their young, and I was done being prey. That evening, Thomas's people retrieved everything from Brett's apartment, herbal supplements, tea bags, even a bottle of wine he'd insisted I drink just one glass of. Victor sent everything to a forensic lab with rush orders. The results came back at midnight. Pennyroyal, Victor read from the report, a known abortifacient found in the herbal tea. Also traces of vitamin C in dosages high enough to induce miscarriage. I stared at the papers. Scientific proof that Brett had tried to murder my baby. This is attempted murder to them, Thomas said. We're calling the district attorney tonight. Wait, I said. They looked at me. I want to confront him first. On record, with Amber present. Claire, that's not safe. I don't care. I want him to know I know. I want him to see what he's lost. Victor considered. We could arrange a deposition, controlled environment, lawyers present, everything recorded. Do it. Because Brett Ashford needed to understand something. He'd made the biggest mistake of his life. He'd underestimated me. The conference room at Victor's law firm felt like a courtroom. Long table, recording equipment, court reporter typing every word. On one side, Brett Ashford and his lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Richard Sullivan. On the other, me, Thomas, Victor, and Rachel for support. Amber sat at the end, avoiding everyone's eyes. Brett looked different, thinner, haggard, the polish gone. Good. Let's begin, Victor said. Mr. Ashford, you're aware this deposition is being recorded and can be used in both the custody hearing and potential criminal proceedings. I'm aware, Brett said coldly. Good. Claire, you have questions for Mr. Ashford. I looked at the man I'd loved, the father of my child, the person who'd tried to kill her. Did you love me? I asked. Brett blinked. What? Simple question. At any point, did you actually love me? His lawyer started to object. Brett waved him off. I cared about you. That's not what I asked. Silence. No, he finally said. I didn't love you. I loved what you represented. The honesty was almost refreshing. And Hope, our daughter, I wanted a child. Eventually. But not when you got it. The timing was inconvenient. Inconvenient, I repeated. Is that why you tried to kill her? His lawyer bolted upright. Objection. That's inflammatory. It's a question, Victor said calmly. He can answer or plead the fifth. Brett's face flushed. I never tried to kill anyone. Then explain the pennyroyal and the herbal tea you gave me, the excessive vitamin C supplements, the wine you insisted I drink despite knowing I was pregnant. I don't know what you're talking about. I slid the toxicology report across the table. This says otherwise. Forensic analysis of products from your apartment. all containing substances known to induce miscarriage. Brett's lawyer grabbed the report. His face went white. "Brett," Sullivan hissed, "don't say another word." But Brett's composure cracked. "You think you're so smart. You think you've won. I think you're going to prison," I said calmly. "I'm a victim here. You orchestrated this whole thing, the recording, the public humiliation, turning my own board against me. I didn't orchestrate anything. I just stopped lying for you. You destroyed my company. You destroyed your company. I just made sure everyone saw it." Brett lunged across the table. Thomas caught him by the collar, slammed him back into his seat. "Touch my daughter again and you'll regret it," Thomas said quietly. Security entered. Victor waved them back. "We're done here, I Sullivan said. "My client is invoking his Fifth Amendment right." "Too late," Victor smiled. "Everything he just said is on record, including the tacit admission about the supplements." Amber spoke for the first time. "He told me it was herbal tea for morning sickness." Brett whirled on her. "Shut up. He said if she lost the baby naturally, we could move up the timeline, get married sooner, that the optics of supporting her through a miscarriage would be better for the IPO than a shotgun wedding." "You lying." "I have the text, Brett, where you asked me to research natural remedies that could solve the problem." Brett's world collapsed in real time. His lawyer looked ready to quit. I leaned forward. "You tried to kill my daughter. You used me. You lied to everyone. And you thought you'd get away with it because you're rich and charming and used to winning. Claire, I'm not finished. You're going to lose custody. You're going to lose your company. And if there's any justice in this world, you're going to lose your freedom. But most importantly, you're going to lose hope. She's never going to know your name. She's never going to call you daddy. You're going to be nothing but a cautionary tale we tell when she's old enough to understand." Tears streamed down my face, but my voice stayed steady. "You wanted to erase us. Instead, we erased you." Brett stared at me. Something flickered in his eyes. Regret, realization, too little, too late. "This deposition is over," Sullivan said, gathering papers. "One more thing," Victor said. "Mr. Ashford, Detective Sarah Walsh from the NYPD would like to speak with you. She's waiting outside with an arrest warrant for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit fraud." Brett's face went gray. The door opened. Detective Walsh entered with two uniformed officers. "Brett Ashford, you're under arrest. You have the right to remain silent." They handcuffed him. "Let him pass me." He stopped. "I could have given her everything," he whispered. "She doesn't want everything," I replied. "She just wants a father who isn't a monster." They took him away. Amber started crying. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix anything," I said. "But testifying might." Victor handed her papers. "Immunity agreement. Sign it. Testify truthfully. And maybe you can rebuild your life." She signed with shaking hands. We left the conference room. Outside, news crews waited, cameras flashing, questions shouting. "Mrs. Morrison, how do you feel about your husband's arrest? Do you think he'll go to prison? What do you want people to know?" I stopped, looked at the cameras, at the world watching. "I want people to know that powerful men aren't invincible, that women aren't possessions, and that babies born too early can still grow up to change the world." "What about Hope? How is she?" I smiled for the first time in days. "She's fighting, and she's winning." We got into Thomas's car, drove back to the hospital in silence. In the NICU, Hope slept peacefully, unaware of the battle fought in her name. I touched her tiny hand through the porthole. "It's over, baby girl," I whispered. "You're safe now." Her fingers curled around mine, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I believed it. We were going to be okay. 3 months later, Hope weighed 5 pounds and breathed without assistance. The NICU staff called her their miracle baby. She'd beaten every odd, just like her mother. The trial began on a cold November morning. Manhattan Criminal Court, packed with journalists and spectators. Brett faced multiple charges: securities fraud, attempted murder, conspiracy. I sat in the gallery with Thomas and Rachel. Hope stayed with a nurse at the hospital, too young for courtroom drama. Brett entered in an orange jumpsuit. No more Tom Ford suits. No more Rolex. just a broken man paying for his crimes. The prosecutor was Margaret Foster, a sharp woman in her 50s with a reputation for destroying white-collar criminals. "The people call Amber Sinclair," she announced. Amber took the stand, thinner now, older. The affair had aged her. "Ms. Sinclair, how did your relationship with Mr. Ashford begin?" "He hired me as PR director 18 months ago. The affair started 6 months later." "Did he discuss his relationship with Claire Morrison?" "Yes, he said she was useful, connected to money through her father, that marrying her would boost investor confidence." In the pregnancy, "He was angry at first, called it bad timing. Then he realized he could use it, make himself look like a family man before the eye." "Did he ever discuss ending the pregnancy?" Amber's voice shook. "Yes, he asked me to research herbs that could cause miscarriage. Said if it happened naturally, no one could blame him." The gallery erupted in whispers. The judge banged his gavel. "He gave her pennyroyal tea," Amber continued. "High-dose vitamin C. He tracked her stress levels, hoping she'd lose the baby." "Why didn't you stop him?" "I was in love. Stupid. I thought we'd be together after he divorced her." "When did you realize you'd been used?" "When his lawyers blamed everything on me, said I'd seduced him, manipulated him, that I was the real villain." She looked at Brett. He stared at the table. "He throws everyone away," Amber said. "I'm just lucky I figured it out before he destroyed me completely." The prosecutor dismissed her. Brett's lawyer, Sullivan, tried to discredit her testimony but failed. The evidence was too strong. Next came the forensic experts. They confirmed the pennyroyal, the vitamin C, the timeline of my declining health. Then Thomas took the stand. "Mr. Morrison, how did you discover Brett Ashford's plans?" "I run background checks on anyone who gets close to my daughter. Brett's company valuation didn't match his revenue. His IPO projections were fantasy. I knew he was committing fraud." "Why didn't you tell Claire?" Thomas looked at me. "Because she wouldn't have believed me. She needed to see it herself." "Some might call that cruel. Some might call it teaching her to be strong. My daughter survived a man who tried to erase her. She'll survive anything now." The prosecutor smiled. "No further questions?" Finally, I took the stand. The courtroom fell silent. Everyone waited to hear from the woman at the center of it all. Margaret Foster approached gently. "Mrs. Morrison, tell us about your relationship with Brett Ashford." I took a breath. "I met him at a charity gala. He was charming, successful. Everything I thought I wanted." "When did you realize something was wrong?" "Small things at first. He'd criticize my friends, control my schedule. But I convinced myself it was love. And the pregnancy. I thought it would fix things, make him happy, make us a real family." "When did you learn the truth?" 20 minutes before my wedding. I overheard him on the phone telling his mistress I was just the image, that the baby was a brand asset. How did that make you feel?" Tears burned my eyes. Like I'd never mattered at all. "But you didn't run." "Why?" "Because I realized something. He'd made me small, dependent, afraid, and I was done being those things." "So you exposed him publicly?" "I exposed the truth. The rest was his own doing." Brett's lawyer stood for cross-examination. "Mrs. Morrison, isn't it true you orchestrated this entire scenario for financial gain?" "No. Your father owns 40% of Mr. Ashford's lenders. Convenient, isn't it? My father protected me. That's what parents do. You recorded a private conversation without consent. New York is a one-party consent state. I was party to the conversation. It's legal." Sullivan's jaw tightened. "You publicly humiliated my client. Your client publicly humiliated himself. I just made sure everyone could see it. You cost him his company, his reputation. He cost me my health, my trust, almost my daughter's life. I think he got off easy." The gallery murmured agreement. Sullivan had nothing left. No further questions. The trial lasted 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. We, the jury, find the defendant, Brett Ashford, guilty on all counts. The courtroom erupted. Brett's face crumbled. His lawyer patted his shoulder, but it was over. At sentencing, the judge looked at Brett with disgust. Mr. Ashford, you used your wealth and position to manipulate a vulnerable woman. You endangered an unborn child. You committed fraud on a massive scale. This court sentences you to 8 years in federal prison, followed by 5 years probation. You will have no contact with Claire Morrison or Hope Morrison. You are permanently stripped of parental rights. Brett was led away in handcuffs. I felt nothing. No joy, no vindication, just exhaustion and relief. Outside, reporters swarmed. How do you feel? Tired? I said honestly. But free. What's next for you and Hope? I smiled. We're going home. 6 months after the trial, Hope came home from the hospital. 7 pounds of perfect, healthy baby. I'd sold the apartment I'd shared with Brett, used the settlement money to buy a brownstone in Brooklyn. Small, but ours. Safe. Rachel helped me set up the nursery. Soft yellow walls, white crib, photos of Mom on the dresser. It's perfect, Rachel said. Hanging curtains. It's home. Thomas visited every day, learning to be a grandfather, relearning how to be a father. One afternoon, he brought a gift, a silver rattle, engraved with Hope's initials. Your mother bought this for you when you were born, he said quietly. I saved it. Thank you, Dad. I'm sorry it took me so long to be here. You're here now. That's what matters. We sat together watching Hope sleep. 3 generations of Morrison women, surviving and thriving. The first few weeks home were harder than I'd expected. Hope cried through the nights. I stumbled through feedings every 2 hours. Exhausted but grateful. Every cry meant she was alive. Every breath meant we'd made it. Rachel stayed over most nights, taking shifts so I could sleep. Thomas hired a night nurse for the first month, though I was too stubborn to use her much. You don't have to do everything alone, Rachel reminded me one bleary morning. I know, but I need to prove I can. You've already proven everything. Claire, let people help. She was right. Slowly, I learned to accept support. The night nurse became a godsend. Rachel's cooking filled my freezer. Thomas handled every legal detail, every financial decision, every burden I'd once carried alone. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't fighting alone. I'm opening a design business, I told Thomas one afternoon. Small events, weddings, helping people create honest celebrations. You'll be excellent at it. I'm calling it Morrison and Grace Interiors, after Mom and Hope. His eyes misted. She'd love that. I know. The business started in my living room. 1 client, then 2. A bride who'd read about my story and wanted someone who understood that weddings should be about love, not performance. An anniversary party for a couple rebuilding after betrayal. Word spread quietly. Women who'd survived their own battles. Families wanting authenticity. I designed a wedding for a couple who'd survived cancer together. An anniversary party for parents celebrating 50 years. A baby shower for a single mother who'd left an abusive marriage. Real love, real life. No performance required. Each event felt like healing. Not just for my clients, but for me. I was taking the worst day of my life and transforming it into something that helped others celebrate their best days. Hope grew stronger every day, smiled at 2 months, laughed at 4, started crawling at 6. My daughter had no memory of the NICU, no knowledge of the fight for her life. She knew only love and safety and joy, exactly as it should be. One evening, I sat on the brownstone steps, watching her play on a blanket. Thomas brought coffee. She looks like Grace, he said. She has your stubbornness. Good, she'll need it. A man approached, nervous, holding flowers. Mrs. Morrison. Just Claire, I said. I'm David Fletcher. I was an investor in Ashford Tech. Lost everything when the company collapsed. My body tensed. Thomas moved closer, protective. I'm not here to blame you, David said quickly. I'm here to thank you. You exposed a fraud that would have destroyed dozens of companies, hundreds of jobs. You saved people from losing retirement accounts. College funds? You're a hero. I'm not a hero. I'm just a mother who protected her child. Sometimes that's the same thing. He handed me the flowers and walked away. Thomas squeezed my shoulder. He's right, you know. About what? You're a hero. To Hope, to me, to everyone who's ever been underestimated. I looked at my daughter, my father, my life rebuilt from ashes. I'm not a hero, I repeated. I'm just someone who refused to disappear. That night, after Hope fell asleep, I opened my laptop. The support group I'd joined for domestic abuse survivors had asked me to write my story. I started typing. 20 minutes before my wedding, I heard my fiancé's voice through his phone. The words flowed. The pain, the fear, the fight, the victory, but also the truth. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about refusing to let someone else's cruelty define you. It's about standing up and saying, I matter. My child matters. And we deserve better. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's rebuilding. It's taking the pieces of what they broke and creating something beautiful. Brett Ashford tried to erase me. Instead, he gave me the strength to become someone he could never touch. I'm not a victim anymore. I'm a survivor. And more importantly, I'm free. I posted the essay at midnight. By morning, it had been shared 10,000 times. Messages poured in from women around the world, thanking me, sharing their stories, finding courage. One message stood out. My husband has been controlling me for years. Reading your story gave me the strength to leave. Thank you for showing me I can survive. Emma, I wrote back immediately. You can more than survive. You can thrive, be brave. I'm here if you need support. Because that's what survivors do. We lift each other up. The brownstone filled with light and laughter. Hope's first birthday party, Rachel bringing her boyfriend, Thomas teaching Hope to say grandpa. Normal, beautiful, hard-earned life. Late one night, my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello, Claire Morrison. Yes. This is Officer Davis from Rikers Island. Brett Ashford listed you as emergency contact. He's been hospitalized. My stomach dropped. What happened? Inmate altercation. He's stable but requesting to see you. No. Ma'am, I have a restraining order. He has no rights to contact me, and I have no interest in seeing him. He says he needs to apologize. He had months to apologize. Years, really. I'm not interested. I hung up. Thomas appeared in the doorway. Who was that? Brett. He's in the hospital. Wants to see me. Are you going? No. That chapter of my life is closed. He's nothing to me now. Good. He doesn't deserve your forgiveness. It's not about what he deserves. It's about what I deserve. Peace. And I can't have that if I keep looking back. Hope cried from the nursery. I went to her, lifted her from the crib, held her close. It's okay, baby girl. Mommy's here. She settled immediately. Trusted. Safe. That's when I knew I'd truly won. Not because Brett was in prison, not because I'd gotten justice, but because my daughter would grow up knowing she was loved, protected, valued. She'd never be someone's image. She'd be herself. Wholly, completely, free. Hope Morrison, age 5, wore a yellow dress and cowboy boots. She'd insisted on the boots. Said princesses could wear whatever they wanted. I couldn't argue with that logic. We stood outside Morrison and Grace Interiors, my design studio in downtown Brooklyn, the grand opening of our new expanded space. 20 employees now. Booked solid for 2 years. Rachel adjusted Hope's hair. You ready to cut the ribbon, kiddo? Can I use the big scissors? Absolutely not. I laughed. Thomas arrived with a photographer. My father, now 70, had retired from private equity to spend time with his granddaughter. They went to the park every Saturday, to museums, to the zoo, making up for lost time. Ready? He asked. Ready? We gathered for the ribbon cutting. Employees, clients, friends, the community that had supported us. I held the scissors with Hope. We cut together. Applause, cheers, flashing cameras. Inside, the studio gleamed. Design boards lined the walls. Mood boards for upcoming weddings and events. All real, all honest, all beautiful. A woman approached, nervous, young, pregnant. Mrs. Morrison, I'm Emma Parker. I wrote to you 5 years ago. You told me I could survive. The name clicked. The woman who'd messaged after my essay went viral. Emma, how are you? Free. I left my husband, finished my degree. I'm a social worker now, helping other survivors. She gestured to her belly, and I'm having a baby, a girl. Tears filled my eyes. That's wonderful. I wanted to thank you in person. Your story saved my life, and now I'm helping save others. We hugged. Two survivors, two mothers, proof that trauma doesn't have to win. Later, after the party wound down, Thomas and I sat on the studio steps. Hope played with sidewalk chalk. Your mother would be so proud, he said. I know. I'm proud too, in case I don't say it enough. You say it enough. Dad, I wasted so many years being angry, distant. I'll regret that forever. We can't change the past. We can only build the future. Hope ran over. Chalk-covered hands extended. Grandpa, come draw with me. Thomas smiled, stood, followed his granddaughter to her chalk masterpiece. I watched them together. This man who'd once been so cold, now laughing as Hope drew rainbows on concrete. People can change. Families can heal. Survivors can thrive. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Brett Ashford granted parole hearing after 5 years served. I stared at the notification. Felt. Nothing. No anger, no fear, just indifference. He was part of my past. Not my present, never my future. I deleted the alert and focused on what mattered. Hope, Thomas, Rachel, my business, my life. The life I'd built from nothing but determination and love. That evening, I tucked Hope into bed. She clutched the silver rattle Thomas had given me years ago. Mama, yes, baby, you're the bravest person in the world. Why do you say that? Because Grandpa told me you fought monsters and won. I smoothed her hair. Not monsters, sweetheart. Just someone who forgot that people aren't possessions. What's that mean? It means everyone deserves to be loved for who they are, not what they can give. Like me, exactly like you. She yawned. I love you, Mama. I love you too. Hope, more than anything. She fell asleep holding the rattle. I kissed her forehead and stepped into the hall. Thomas waited outside. She's amazing. She is. You raised her right. We raised her right. He smiled. Thank you for forgiving me. Thank you for showing up. We stood in comfortable silence. Father and daughter, grandfather and grandmother-to-be of future generations of strong Morrison women. I thought about everything that had led here. The betrayal, the pain, the fight, the victory. Would I change it if I could? No. Because suffering taught me strength. Betrayal taught me boundaries. Fighting taught me I was worth fighting for. And hope taught me that love doesn't have to hurt. Real love protects, supports, elevates. Everything else is just performance. I walked to my bedroom, opened my laptop one last time. The essay I'd written 5 years ago had become a book. From image to icon, one woman's journey from manipulation to freedom. It had helped thousands of women leave abusive relationships, started conversations about coercive control, changed laws about prenatal endangerment. One woman's story, echoing across the world. I added a final chapter. 5 years later, I'm not the woman who stood at that altar. I'm someone stronger, wiser, freer. Brett Ashford tried to reduce me to an image, a possession, a means to an end, but I was never his to define. I was always mine. To every woman reading this, you are not what someone else decides you are. You are not your trauma. You are not your worst moment. You are your courage, your resilience, your refusal to disappear. And sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living so fully, so authentically, so powerfully that the person who tried to break you becomes irrelevant. They tried to write your ending. Instead, you wrote your beginning. This is my beginning. What's yours? I closed the laptop. Outside my window, Brooklyn glowed with evening light. Somewhere in this city, women were fighting their own battles, finding their own strength, writing their own stories. And tomorrow, I'd be here to help them. Because that's what survivors do. We survive. We thrive. We lift others up. One story, one woman, one fight at a time. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Emma Parker. Thank you for showing me that broken doesn't mean defeated. I'm naming my daughter Grace, after your mother, after hope, after second chances. I smiled through tears. Another Grace, another hope, another survivor. The cycle breaking, the future brightening. One brave woman at a time. I set down my phone, turned off the light, and went to sleep. Free, whole, home,